go to the heart of the book. What did you learn over there in Kabul and in Afghanistan in combat that is directly applicable, whether you're in the legislature or Secretary of State or as you look forward to perhaps being mayor?
I guess the biggest thing that I learned is that you can't make any kind of change from inside your comfort zone. And that's really what the book is about. It's for anybody, whether it's politics or otherwise, who has something that they want to change about the world or about themselves and thinks, well, maybe I can wait on it, maybe it'll come. It's about making that someday that you put out in front of you for the thing you want to do, making that today. And for me, I spent about 8 years in uniform, and I've spent about 8 years in elected office, and it's what I learned in that first 8 years that I took to the second. I mean, it's stuff like sitting across from the Afghan Attorney General and having him say to me, this man sitting next to me who he swore didn't speak any English, the Afghan Attorney General said he's tried to have me killed several times, but luckily he's totally incompetent. Now, it turned out later, my partner went outside and was having a smoke break. This fella said to her in perfect English, told her about his land that he owns in Nebraska, which was a lesson I learned that said, don't assume that everything you think is right is actually right. And then I tell stories about how I used that when I was in the state legislature.
So as I say, there are quite a few combat veterans who are running for office across the country, either national office or state office right now. I wonder if there's something else that we all could benefit from, and that is, and I know this from having friends who are veterans, that when you're serving in the armed forces, you're serving a greater cause. There may not be quite as much room for petty partisanship, that you have to think about what's good for the country overall.
Well, it's not just that. You're serving the people next to you. I mean, you're part of a family, and it was always amazing to me. One of the things I talk about in Outside the Wire is how when you're over there, politicians back home love to say that this or that affects the morale of the troops. I point out that in my unit, we were passing around People magazine and tabloids because we didn't want to have to think about really serious stuff all the time. We had a major serious job to do. So I have a whole lesson in the book where I talk about don't be a yellow ribbon car magnet personified. Don't just be somebody who has a trite throwaway line about the troops. You got to actually do more than take pictures with them. And so yeah, there's no question that for me, really the biggest reason I wrote the book, I'm tired of seeing so many people in politics in America for whom the hardest thing they've ever been through in their life is the campaign that got them into office in the first place. And as a result, they'll do anything to stay there because they think losing the job would be the worst thing that could ever happen to them.
Those are really great values and ideals, but a lot of people would say, how much do constituents really care about that? Because especially the office of the mayor, a lot of people say, isn't it about filling potholes and picking up trash?
Sure. Well, look, I'm running for mayor of Kansas City because I love my hometown, because it's an opportunity to take the progress we've made and make sure everybody in the city can feel that progress and see it. And every single thing that you do for a constituent is about demonstrating that progressive values can work when you can show people actual progress. So for me, it's just grabbing an oar and getting out there and doing something. But in terms of whether constituents really care about it, I think that, and one of the points I make in the book, folks are not they're not looking for you to agree with them on every single issue. Politicians think that. That's why they're always in a hurry to get to where the voter is. No, folks are looking for you to lead and to demonstrate that you care enough to tell them something that they don't already believe, to try and actually convince them of something.
So what do your constituents care about right now? Because we are seeing more national issues as well at play. In Missouri, we know that there's that vote on the right to work. Do they care about all of those issues? How important is that to them?
Oh, extremely. I mean, in Kansas City, what we're all trying to do, and a big part of why I'm running for mayor, we want people to be able to succeed in our town without having to leave town or move across town. And when you look at something like Proposition A in Missouri right now, I voted against it. I voted no. What Proposition A would do is it would say that, they would drive wages down as a race to the bottom in the state. That's not what the people in Missouri wanted. This was actually on the ballot about 40 years ago. We voted it down. I believe we're going to vote it down again today.
Yeah, there's a big difference, though, isn't there, from 40 years ago? And that is the extent to which state and local governments have taken on enormous debt because of pensions, directly attributed, many people think, to that municipal and state unions. I mean, can we afford anymore to require state workers to pay into these unions?
Well, first of all, this really doesn't have anything to do with pensions, this vote today. Second of all, look.
But the pensions are driven in part by the unions lobbying.
Yeah. Well, look, these are things that people have worked for. I mean, we always talk about this as if it's like some sort of handout. I mean, people put in work. I mean, I don't know if there's a pension here at Bloomberg, but I bet you I'll put in work for it if there is. Social Security, something people put in work for. I mean, this is something people put in work for. Also, the other piece to this vote that I always remind people of is this is the state legislature coming in and saying to companies, not to workers, but to companies, you're not allowed to have this kind of contract. A contract that says we're going to make a deal with our employees that in order to work here, you need to be a part of paying into the benefits that you get. Well, we never suggest, like no one ever says that the legislature should come in and say, hey, you should void contracts from one business to another. They only seem interested in doing it when it's contracts between businesses and employees. And if you're really going to talk about freedom, as the Republicans often like to, well, freedom is letting companies make deals with their employees.
So let's talk about the Republicans in Kansas right now. We've got a big election coming in November. You do, but a lot of other people do as well.
Including next year. And
including Claire McCaskill, who's up for Senate, right?
Sure.
To what extent will Donald Trump, the president, be a factor as people go to the polls?
Well, look, Donald Trump won my state in 2016 by 19 points. And on the same day, I just barely lost, less than 3 points. 220,000 people voted for him and voted for me, even though about the only thing we agree on is, my understanding is we both have a fear of sharks. So we got that in common. Other than that, Missouri is a place where people look at it and they say, you know what, I want to know where your heart is. One of the very first doors I ever knocked on when I was running for state legislature, I knocked on this fellow's door, and he comes to the door. We start talking about an issue, and it was clear we had completely different views on it. I had not been a politician very long, so I start trying to do what I'd seen on TV, and I start trying to spin him. And it's pretty quickly evident that that's making things worse. So then I get a little desperate, and I just frustrated, and I just say, we obviously disagree. Thanks for your time. I go to walk off. I just said, now you know where I stand. And he says to me, he says, well, you know what, that's fair. I'll vote for you, and you can put a sign in my yard. And that, that story isn't outside the wire, and it's just sort of the intro to how I learned that this is not about, it's not a test question. Voters don't have a spreadsheet that they go down and try and figure out, where are you on this? Voters are trying to figure out, do you really believe the words coming out of your own mouth? And if you do, what do I think about those words? And are you saying them because you care about people like me? That's the test in Missouri. It's not about one politician or another.
Do they care enough to go to the ballots and cast the ballots?
Yeah, I think you're going to see today that folks are going to turn out and they're going to vote no on Proposition A. And in Kansas City, I hope they're going to vote yes on Question 1.
What about national Democrats? How much impact will they have? Because the Republicans are trying to link Nancy Pelosi to a lot of Democrats.
Yeah, it's always a funny thing for me to watch. And one of the things I point out in Outside the Wire is that most people, the average voter, they don't think about politics as often as politicians do. It's actually a lot more like the way my friends and I talk about baseball. Like, I'm a lifelong Royals fan, which I'm sorry to folks in New York, but that makes me contractually and morally obligated to hate the Yankees because they treat us like a farm team a lot. If I'm sitting around with my buddies and we're talking about baseball and I say, Aaron Judge, you got to admit that guy was pretty natural for Rookie of the Year. Nobody's like, you're not a real Royals fan. Get out of here. That's the way the average voter consumes politics. They're sitting around and somebody can say that they're a Republican, and then one of them can say at their little breakfast table with their buddies, they can say, kind of like that Kander, I'm going to go vote for him. And nobody's like, get out of here, because they don't have to justify it. They're not politicians, they're voters. So the answer to your question is, they're always trying to make it the other side about national this or national that. But this is all about what's going on in people's lives. And in the middle of the country, what we're all trying to do is we're trying to make it so that our kids can actually, have an opportunity and not have to move and get a good job where we are, because we just want to be around our family.